The 2025 Pokemon World Championships is the most important tournament of the year, and it's all kicking off in Anaheim on August 15th. Unfortunately for me, that's next week, and I've got no clue what I'm going to play yet. Well, I mean, I do have some idea. Obviously, I want it to be a good, solid deck that'll give me a realistic shot at winning Worlds. You know, like Gholdengo, Grimmsnarl, Gardevoir, Dragapult, or Crustle? This capable crustacean is carrying more than just a colossal cube of lasagna. He's also hauling my hopes and dreams of claiming that coveted #1 trainer card. Now, Crustle isn't the most conventional way to play the game. It's a relatively low agency deck, is laser focused on exploiting a few specific weaknesses in the meta, and has an incredibly polarizing matchup spread. But none of that stopped Iron Thorns from winning last year. This style of tournament approach shifts a lot of the skill expression away from your actual in-game play, to instead lay entirely with your ability to predict the meta and deck build a perfect counter, foregoing any skill-based 50-50s against the world's best, and instead opting for a matchup roulette where the outcomes are practically predetermined. And to be honest, actually being able to determine the popularity, success, and tech cards of other decks in the room is absolutely a valid skill in the Pokemon TCG. Sure, you might get unlucky and hit some bad variants, pairing into a few underrepresented off-meta decks that you don't quite have an answer to. But you could also be running a deck that 50-50s everything and have some less than ideal draws. There is always going to be some element of luck to these things, and Crustle is by no means the first deck to do this. I already mentioned last year's first place Quad Iron Thorns list. The recently rotated Snorlax Stall is another iconic example. At the time, almost every deck in the meta could easily tech for it, but they'd rather not. And if you could pinpoint the exact moment when they would stop respecting Retreat Lock, you'd be able to capitalize and remind everyone why it's so important to include those crucial switching cards. Walls is another deck that started popping up again not too long ago, having a toolbox of solid answers into just about everything outside of Gardevoir, which was unfortunately the best deck in that meta. A couple fellas even went on a run with it at Melbourne Regionals, proving exactly that, beating almost everything except for that Psychic Menace. And if we go back even further, when Broken Lugia dominated the game, so many hopeful Duraludon VMAX enjoyers rocked up, praying that they'd exclusively pair into special energy-filled Lugias. Back to this upcoming Worlds though. Why Crustle, and why now? Well, just look at these stats. Over 70% win rate into Gholdengo, the best deck in the room. A great time into Marnie's Grimmsnarl, a reasonable Raging Bolt matchup, and incredible favorables into the two most popular variants of Dragapult. And at what cost? An auto loss into Gardevoir and Ethan's Typhlosion? I actually like those odds. However, you might be looking at this and thinking, but you still lose these favorables 30 or 40% of the time. They're not true auto wins. Of course they aren't. You can always brick, succumb to poor pricing, or have something else go seriously wrong. But these stats are actually quite deceptive for two main reasons. The first is that for these percentage win rates, ties are treated as losses, and that's including intentional draws as well. And the second is that the majority of their numbers are based on playing just a single game. And you'd be surprised how much this changes when you factor in a full best of 3 set. I'm going to quickly put my maths hat on so we can properly visualize this. Please subscribe. Let's take the current most popular meta deck as our example. According to online results, against Gholdengo, when you disregard ties, the matchup is about 77% favored for Crustle. Already incredible, but unfortunately, you're taking an L in about a quarter of those individual games. But let's take a look at a full best of 3. You've got 3 possible ways to take down the entire set, cleanly dominating the first 2 games, which happens just under 60% of the time, winning the first game, losing the second, and then clutching it up in the third, which happens almost 15% of the time. And the last way, losing the first game and then following up with a reverse sweep, which has exactly the same odds. This is all assuming that there is no difference between going first and second, which isn't always the case, but it definitely simplifies the maths for this example. Anyway, if we add up all of these preferable outcomes, we get pretty much a 10% increase in overall win rate. And this is a really key aspect when it comes to a best of 3 format. The further you drift from a true neutral 50-50 win rate, the more exaggerated it becomes when playing out a complete set. All this to say, decks with polarizing matchup spreads can seriously reap these benefits, assuming that you dodge all of those perceived auto losses. But can we maneuver around the minefield matchups to the point where Crustle really is the play for Worlds? Well, let's take a look at the top 20 meta decks to find out just how likely these unwanted pairings really are. And again, these are just online results, but it's the best we've got to work with for now. Of these 20, Crustle only has a negative win rate into 5 of them: Gardevoir, Ethan's Typhlosion, Dragapult Dusknoir, Gardevoir Jellicent, and Ho-Oh Armarouge. When you add up each of their meta shares, you get a grand total of 20.37%. So you're telling me 80% of the time I'm absolutely farming? Wait, how many games do I actually need to win in order to make top cut of Worlds? It should be a record of about 9 wins and 2 losses, right? That means I only need to win 82% of my games. So if I just hit a couple of Goldingos, Grimmsnarls, Charizards, and a few Dragapults without any Dusknoirs, I'll happily take a loss to a Gardevoir and some random Ethan's Typhlosion enjoyer. Then I'll be on my way to top cut of Worlds. Sounds easy, but we can do even better than that. What if I hit an extra Gardevoir? I don't want that to ruin my Cinderella run. How about we flip that embarrassing win rate against Ethan's Typhlosion into yet another auto win? You see, Crustle doesn't exactly require much in terms of core cards to function. You've got your 3 Dwebbles, your 3 Crussles, heaps of energies, and a whole bunch of consistency supporters to keep the engine going. So we've got plenty of free space to work with when it comes to tech cards. Generally, this is reserved for Monkey Dory's Adrenabrain damage reversal, Cornerstone Ogerpon for additional walling, or even Iron Thorns EX for a bit of extra disruption. But how about this delicious looking, well-baked body? As long as we're confident that Typhlosions won't be playing the Pidgeot EX variant, this is a perfect counter. And you can even run a cheeky copy of the EX for some surprise healing in other matchups. But is this even worth it? In every other scenario, we would just be playing with multiple bricks that could otherwise be acting as more consistency to help reduce those edge case games where we fail to set up against favorable matchups. Say Typhlosion is 5% of the world's meta, and in this perfect world, they all have 0 answers to the pastry pup. We should be winning 5% more of our games. But if these changes reduced our odds in the 80% of other winnable matchups by 7% or more, it just wouldn't be worth the consistency downside and would actually lower our overall effective win rate. But what if Typhlosion was 6% of the meta? Or 7, or 8 at some point. Regardless of how detrimental to the rest of our deck the tech inclusion is, it does eventually become worth dedicating multiple slots to. This is all just part of the skills that I mentioned before: reading the meta, identifying likely tech inclusions, and determining which cards you should run in your own 60 to optimize your overall win rate. So you could crunch a whole bunch of numbers and mathematically determine whether or not Crustle is in fact the optimal choice to win Worlds. Or alternatively, you could make the call by posting a fun little video. And if it just so happens to get 100,000 views before decklist submissions close, I'll lock in that lovable lasagna crab. Head down to the comments and send me some good luck for Worlds. I am really gonna need it. As always, thanks to all you wonderful fellas for supporting me. And if you want access to a bit more bonus content, feel free to join as a YouTube channel member or over on my Patreon. Cheers.